specifically for people who are working within this sector. We've got two lovely speakers today, Lorna, who's an HR advisor, and also Charlotte from a health and safety and environment point of view. As I said earlier, please note we are being recorded. In the breakout rooms or later on when anyone is asking any questions, we will turn the recording off. But do bear in mind that if you ask anything, it will be included in the recording, which will be shared with everyone who booked onto this session. So just make sure that you don't sort of obviously pass any confidential information on if you're asking questions, but there'll be plenty of time in the breakout rooms and the chat at the end to ask anything you want. If you want to ask a question, could you please put it in the chat box, which should be an icon at the bottom of your screen called chat. If you can tell us your name so that we can trace you and make sure we answer your questions. So we will be monitoring the chat box. We will pick up any questions as we go if we can. And if not, we will make sure that we contact you afterwards and we answer any questions. But hopefully we should have plenty of time to cover this. The Charity Hub, yes, as I was saying, we're really pleased to be doing this. We're doing this every quarter. We did an initial series of 3 webinars, so there'll be another one coming up. This is the second one, which is all about wellbeing, and we're particularly looking at wellbeing within the charity sector today, and also from a health and safety and an HR point of view. It's a really good opportunity for you guys to hear our expert speakers, but also share knowledge with each other about the special circumstances of working within the charity sector. Can we have the next slide, Alice? We'll try and cover them as we go. And I think, Lorna, you're our first speaker.
Yep, so we're going to be looking at practical approaches for wellbeing and resilience. We're going to be supporting mental health, looking at supporting mental health at work. We're going to be looking at the legal duties around stress, wellbeing, and reasonable adjustments. And we're going to be looking at creating a culture of wellbeing in resource limited charities. So before we get, or just quickly before we get started, we'd like to do a quick poll question just to see, why do people choose to work in the charity sector? There's no right or wrong answer. It just helps us set the context for the rest of the session. Okay, I'm just having a look. Yeah. Right, I'm going to end the poll now and share results. Okay, so it looks as though it's split quite a way across making a positive difference, working for a values-driven organisation, and doing meaningful people-focused work. So we at Biani, we're lucky to have worked with a number of charities, and from what we can see, people do choose to work in those charities because of the purpose, the values, the community. We can see the work is deeply fulfilling, and we get to see all the fundraising events, all the success stories from service users, but we know that that's not always the full picture. We know that you guys do a tremendous job of supporting others, but we wanted to do a session about kind of making sure that you're supporting yourselves and your colleagues, because we know that the charity sector is under pressure. So if we just Alice, I'm just having an issue with the poll, and then move on. Okay, so what are those pressures that you guys are experiencing? I've got our list here. I'm not going to do another poll, but I'll take a head nod to say, is our list accurate? I guess trauma exposure will depend on the kind of charity that you're working in, but the anecdotal stories that we're hearing from is that frontline charity workers have emotionally challenging roles and are experiencing increased workloads. And those in the back office are not immune either. You're kind of working in a hostile financial environment. You're definitely having to do more with less. And there's always that balance for dwindling resources and the growing demand for services. So it's great that some of that great that some of that pressure can be offset by kind of the success stories and all of those wonderful things that we said at the start about why you choose to work in the in charity industry. But we're all human, and sometimes the balance might falter a little bit. And so we just wanted to have a little bit of a chat about kind of mental well-being and burnout and how we can kind of help prevent those within the workplace. I'm conscious these bullet points we've just looked at don't paint the prettiest picture, but we want this session not to be all doom and gloom. We want to focus on what we can proactively do to make the sector or keep the sector special. Right. So why is well-being important? Well-being isn't just kind of a nice to have, it has a direct impact on productivity, engagement, retention, absence. And when well-being issues aren't addressed early, they tend to show up later as absence, high turnover, or employee relations problems. And so we just want to make sure that, you know, well-being is a people issue and it's also an organizational sustainability issue. Right. Oh, hold on a second. Okay, so what staff well-being really means from an HR perspective, it's about creating the conditions where people can safely work safely and sustainably. That includes manageable workloads, supportive management, and early conversations when capacity or health is affected. So if we just start with predictable workload, we've mentioned that when we spoke about the pressures that your industry can face, like one of those things is increasing workload, and we will often see a domino effect. We'll often see domino effect cases whereby one member is off, be it for 1 or 2 days or long term, and it has a significant impact on the mental well-being of those left in the team who have to pick up the slack on top of their own workload. So having capable, confident line managers who can catch those issues early and respond consistently is key. It's not also about building confidence. So it will be about building confidence in your manager, creating safety for staff, and operating within a good framework. So fair policies, consistent procedures, and having support and resources well advertised within your organization is also really important. Okay. So it's not just about yoga sessions or telling people to be more resistant. From an HR perspective, it's about creating conditions where people can work safely and sustainably. That includes managing workloads, supportive management, and those early conversations. So it's perhaps a bit unfair to put charity sector pitfalls. I think it's a lot of industries will be in the same boat here. Often managers can try and handle things informally. Sometimes they start with good intentions, but then when issues escalate or working relationship deteriorates, you find that you've got no evidence of the steps which have been taken so far to resolve an issue. So putting the organisation at risk of unfair dismissal and discrimination claims. So we will be talking about avoiding these pitfalls in more detail, but if you're ever unsure about how to move forward with an issue, then please do get in contact with us. Right, so we're going to do another poll here. This will just give us a bit of a sense check about what's most affecting the well-being in your organisation right now. The results just give you a minute or two to answer. I'll just give you one more minute. Okay, Alice, I think, are you able to share the results? Okay, so at the moment, it looks as though emotional demands of the work and the workload and capability, as well as management capability, are the three things which are really kind of stand out, which kind of ties in with what we've just been saying about kind of the workload and how key those managers are to kind of helping resolve issues. Okay, so what helps staff well-being, and how can we avoid those pitfalls that we've just identified? So what consistently helps well-being is confident line management, regular check-ins, one-to-ones, and permission to talk about capacity. It's also important to keep well-being conversations separate from performance management. So if we take one of those issues that we've spoken about, the workload, because that seems to have cropped up a lot. So predictable workload is really important for well-being, and we've already said that increasing workloads is a massive pressure for your industry. So having capable, confident line managers who can catch the issues early and respond consistently is going to be key. It's not all on the managers though. Having good framework of fair policies, consistent procedures, will help, and having any support or resources well advertised within your organization will really help, as well as creating a proactive wellbeing culture. The responsibility, as I said, it's not just all on managers, HR, health and safety, which is why we've got Make UK here today, as well as the senior leadership team or trustees all have their part to play. So having all that in place will build confidence for your managers. It creates a feeling of safety for your staff, and it also protects your organisation, as it demonstrates fairness and consistency and transparency, and it also helps create an audit trail, if something does go wrong and your decisions are later scrutinised. Okay, so these are the policies which will form the backbone of how well-being is managed in practice. They help ensure mental health is treated consistently and fairly, just like physical health. The policies don't replace human conversations, though. They provide clarity and protection for everyone involved. People are far more likely to raise concerns early if they know what is going to happen next and trust that they are going to be treated fairly. Okay, so if we move on to employment law. So under the Equality Act, mental health can be classed as a disability, which brings specific legal protections. Employers are going to have the duty to make reasonable adjustments and protect employees from discrimination and detriment. It's important to say that people don't need to have a formal diagnosis before you start thinking about support. The key risks are discrimination arising from disability, failure to make reasonable adjustments, and poorly handled absence and capability procedures can lead to unfair or constructive dismissal claims. So the key point of knowledge is once an employer knows or could reasonably be expected to know about a mental health condition or a wellbeing issue, duties are triggered. And this is why those early sensitive conversations matter so much. Okay, so we've mentioned reasonable adjustments. So they are about reducing the disadvantage at work. They're not about removing all of the pressure. What's reasonable depends on the role and the organization and the impact of the adjustment. You have to be cautious saying no to a request. Saying no is not automatically unlawful, but there needs to be a good reason for doing it, and you need to be able to demonstrate that you've engaged with the request properly, you've considered alternatives, and you need to document your reasonings. Having a trial period for any reasonable adjustments, and regular reviews of any temporary adjustments is really good practice. Okay, so charities aren't necessarily expected to provide therapy themselves, but they will be expected to kind of signpost people to support. So from a HR perspective or an HR and legal perspective, signposting should sit alongside management and adjustments and not just replace them. So I realize I've said low cost and free mental health. I know that employee assistance programs are not low cost, but they're often underutilized or underused because people aren't aware of the services which are available through them. So advertising this support properly is a low cost way of fully utilizing something that you have already or already are paying for. There's lots of really good charities out there who can support your charity. I think there's something called Frontline 19 Helpline, which if depending on the nature of your charity, if you have kind of frontline workers, they have got a free confidential 24/7 helpline, which can assist them. Also, lots of local NHS will do NHS talking therapies, which is quite good for people. It's self-referral, so you don't need to go through your GP. So have a look at what's in your area and make sure that it's advertised and that your staff can take advantage of it if they need to. Okay, so I'm going to move on before we pass on to Meg and just have a little bit of a chat around kind of culture and leadership. Um, so, um, a well-being culture doesn't require kind of large budgets. It's just about embedding those that well-being into the values, kind of leadership behavior and everyday decisions. So clear communication, visible leadership commitment, and manager capability make a really big difference. Okay. I'm also just going to, while I'm still on this point, I'm just going to say about fostering staff involvement is also a really good, cheap way of kind of embedding well-being culture. So involving employees in shaping and leading well-being initiatives makes them feel heard and valued. And it could include establishing well-being champions within the team or running peer support groups or focus groups to get feedback on what really works. Also ensuring as part of managers' induction training that they get guidance on spotting early signs of the stress and burnout, equipping them to have conversations with their team members, and ensuring that they know when to refer someone for more formal support. Again, this doesn't have to be expensive. You can create a checklist, you can detail your expectations for managers in kind of a one-page handout. And you can include it, as I said, in the induction training or do it as kind of an annual kind of refresher training for managers. Okay. Okay, so trustees and senior leadership, they play a key role in setting expectations around well-being. Their focus should be on the systems and trend and assurance rather than on individual cases. They can HR and health and safety will provide professional advice, whilst trustees and senior leadership's team can challenge what's happening within an organization and kind of set the direction. So what we would expect kind of trustees or senior leadership to do. So we want to ensure they need to be ensuring that the appropriate policies and procedures are in place. They need to make sure that legal duties are being met. They need to monitor well-being related data and be asking informed questions about capacity and workload and whether or not managers are being trained appropriately. So their role is really to enable early identification and escalation of kind of across the organisation risks rather than just individual risks. I don't think we would expect trustees to kind of get involved or manage individual cases, assess mental health conditions, or access confidential information. You need to have clear boundaries which protect staff and leaders to help maintain trust. Okay, so at this point, we're just going to move on to health and safety responsibilities. So employers have a duty of care that includes mental health, not just physical safety. This duty sits across both employment law and the health and safety law, which is why the two teams must work together. So from an employment perspective, it's always going to be about fairness, consistency, and protection from discrimination. These responsibilities sit primarily with HR, but they link closely to health and safety where work-related risk is involved. And so what we're going to do now is bring in Charlotte from Make, because she will be able to speak to you more about health and safety risks.
Fabulous. Thank you, Lorna. So from a health and safety perspective, there is a lot of crossover, as Lorna identified, but ultimately everything stems from an employer's duty of care, and it's the exact same in health and safety. And in simple terms, this means that organisations must take reasonable steps to protect the health, safety and welfare of their staff. So that includes mental health in exactly the same way it includes physical safety. So the expectation is that employers will identify what could cause harm, assess the level of risk, put sensible controls in place, and keep those under review. If I could have my next slide, please. So to look at this from a purely health and safety point of view and what this looks like in practice, it's really important as it's a growing aspect for many organisations. Now, I know risk assessments sometimes sound a little bit scary, but they really are just a structured way of thinking what in our workplace realistically could lead to stress or poor mental health or well-being. And in each organisation, charity, it's going to be different, but the key word in the law is proportionate. Okay, so no one expects small charities, small organisations to produce huge documents, but we should be able to demonstrate that we have paused, we've considered the risk, and we've acted where we've needed to. So we'll look at that in a little bit more detail now, please, if I could have my next slide. Thank you. So when it comes to the legal side of things for health and safety, there are three big drivers. So first, the general duty to protect health, safety and welfare, which falls within the main piece of health and safety legislation. Second, the requirement to carry out risk assessments and introduce preventative or protective measures. And third, as we've already touched upon, equality law. The legislation makes it clear that mental health and well-being are included within legal health and safety duties, and stress is now a recognised workplace hazard, so organisations are absolutely expected to manage it proportionally. Next slide, please. But before we start talking about how to practically support well-being in the workplace, I want to start on why it matters and the scale of the issue. So each year, organisations have to report certain health and safety figures to the Health and Safety Executive. So this is the enforcing body for health and safety in the UK. Now, according to the information they receive, work-related stress, depression and anxiety account for around half of all the work-related ill health cases in the UK. So this is the UK as a whole, not just the charity sector. Now, this is quite huge. It means when people are sick due to work, it's more likely to be linked to mental health rather than physical injury. So for health and safety people like me, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And it's these statistics what's driving the HSE's shift this year when they're doing their spot visits around organisations. They're going to be looking more into well-being rather than the physical hazards. Now, the HSE also report that around 17 million working days are lost each year due to work-related stress, depression and anxiety. So that has a massive impact not just on the individual themselves, but the teams and the services and organisations. And to put a monetary value on this as well, it is suggested that poor mental health costs UK employers around £6.5 billion a year with things like absence and staff turnover. But it's not just about the money. We know from staff surveys across many sectors that when employees feel supported, valued, and safe at work, there are so many added benefits, which Lorna has already mentioned, things such as job satisfaction, staff retention, performance, all of that good stuff. So supporting wellbeing is not just a nice thing to do or a legal requirement, it is essential for organisational success, safety and sustainability. Because we know that roughly around 1 in 4 people experience a mental health problem each year, and a significant proportion of that is linked to workplace pressure. This means that statistically, in most teams, at least one person is likely to be struggling at any given time, even if it's not obvious. But beyond numbers, we need to remember that this is about real people. So stress affects confidence, home life, physical health, relationships, long-term career progression, you name it. It's definitely something we all need to be getting to grips with. And I will move on now because I can ramble on about this all day. So stress is a health and safety issue. One of the biggest mindset changes in recent years is recognizing stress and well-being as a workplace hazard. So like machinery, like electricity, it kind of falls within a recognized hazard now. And it's not simply about resilience or personality, it's so much more. So as Lorna touched upon, staff wellbeing covers physical, mental, emotional and social health at work. So typically when we think of health and safety, we think of the physical injury, but now we have to be applying that same risk-based approach to wellbeing and stress and actually do something about it. Now, importantly, managing well-being is not about removing pressure completely. Most jobs have pressure. The difference is whether that pressure becomes a manageable challenge or harmful stress. And in some cases, if someone feels supported, trained, and confident, pressure can improve performance. But when demands outweigh resource or support, stress and burnout can develop. Next slide, please. Now, the physical environment plays a bigger role than many people will realise as well. Now, if someone is emotionally stretched, things like noise, uncomfortable workstations, or lack of private space can intensify stress dramatically. You know, physical discomfort can increase fatigue, reduce concentration, and increase stress levels. So, small improvements to workplace design can make quite a significant difference. So, simple steps such as ensuring our display screen assessments are completed, providing quiet areas, or improving lightings can have a surprisingly positive impact. And more often than not, these are quite practical, quite affordable fixes that are often overlooked. Next slide, please. So well-being is usually shaped in everyday moments. As Lorna alluded to, those small actions from managers make quite a big difference. So things like regular check-ins, clear expectations, honest conversations about capacity, and just encouraging people to take breaks are some great practical examples of what you guys can be doing to promote well-being within your workplace. And quite often these simple conversations can prevent problems from escalating. Research consistently shows that staff are far more likely to raise concerns early if they feel safe and supported. So, you know, managers and you guys, you don't need to have all the answers, but we do need to be approachable and willing to listen. And it might include having to deal with personal things, workplace issues like lighting or temperature. I'm sure we've all been there in the shared office with one thermostat, or even just workplace demands. The categories that encompass stress and wellbeing in the workplace are endless. And it's just being mindful of that. And the fact that everyone's different as well. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of practical wellbeing support that I see as a consultant regularly, and I see it working quite successfully as well. That moves kind of beyond the policies and paperwork aspect that Lorna was talking about earlier. So employee assistant programs, so there's so many types of these, and they can include things such as counselling or access to therapists, or even just someone to talk to at the end of the phone if you've got financial issues, for an example. Mental health first aiders, so these people are your eyes and ears on the ground. They're trained to pick up early warning signs and direct people where they need to go. Healthy food availability, so some organisations will provide free fruit, for example, as a benefit to encourage people to eat a balanced diet. Exercise schemes, so your bike to works, your free gym memberships, all of that good stuff to encourage people to exercise for a more rounded lifestyle. We all know that exercise can help us feel better mentally. Certain training, so staff awareness, stress awareness training can provide employees with the knowledge to identify triggers before they have the chance to escalate. Risk assessments, these are the bread and butter for managing stress and wellbeing in the workplace, and we'll take a look at that in the next few slides. Um, Quite often it's not about expensive programs, it's about consistency and genuine support. Next slide, please. So I think we all know that leadership is probably the single biggest factor influencing staff wellbeing and setting the tone for workplace culture. And there is again some crossover with the HR side of things. But if managers demonstrate openness and respect, teams are much more likely to do the same. So managers should aim to create a psychological safety within their organisations, meaning that staff feel safe to speak honestly without fear or blame. So studies show that employees who feel supported by their line manager are significantly less likely to experience stress-related illness. So what does good leadership look like in a practical example? It's all about being approachable, listening actively, recognising achievements, addressing concerns early, and being fair and consistent. And our managers and supervisors might also play a key role in supporting early warning signs as well. So things to be looking out for are things like increased sickness absence, changes in behaviour, reduced performance, withdrawal from team interaction, and all of that sort of stuff. And as I've said before, often a simple conversation can prevent problems from escalating. Next slide, please. So, stress and risk assessments are one of the most powerful prevention tools available. They allow you to step back, look for patterns, and deal with root causes rather than individual crisis. They also provide strong evidence that you're meeting your legal duties, and they're an absolute must in my eyes. Next slide, please. So what is a stress risk assessment? It is a structural approach to identifying hazards, understanding who might be affected, reviewing our current controls that we've got in place, and deciding what else needs to happen. Risk assessments can either be generic, such as for your whole organisation, or in some cases individual, where you've been made aware of one individual who's experiencing problems at work that needs to be assessed specifically. But ultimately, the focus is on the work system and the proportionality, and should consider the 6 management standards. If I could have my next slide, please. So the HSE created 6 management standards to help organisations understand the main causes of work-related stress. These standards are widely recognised in the health and safety world, and as mentioned, are often used when carrying out stress risk assessments. Now you can see there that some of these items within the standard are things that you guys have already recognised in your poll. But the 6 areas to summarise are demands. So this includes things like workload, work patterns, and the working environments. So problems can occur when staff have unrealistic deadlines, too much work, or insufficient staffing. Things such as a simple workload mapping exercise where staff can list certain tasks and the time spent can often highlight unrealistic expectations before they have the chance to cause any stress. Control. So this is how much say people have in how they do their job. Research consistently shows that having autonomy reduces stress levels. One organisation I worked with reduced stress by allowing staff to swap shifts and choose task rotation. And in this example, the absence dropped dramatically. Support, so this includes training, supervision, and emotional support from managers and colleagues. Lack of support is one of the biggest causes of workplace stress, so even short, regular supervision sessions are more effective than long, infrequent ones. Relationships, so positive working relationships and preventing bullying or conflict are essential. Poor relationships can quickly damage morale and mental health, so it's really important that we try to encourage early mediation rather than allowing conflicts to escalate into formal grievances. Roles, so staff need to understand what is expected of them. Confusion, conflicting instructions or unclear responsibilities can cause significant stress. Now, a practical tip for this includes regularly checking in with your team and asking if their job description is still accurate for what they are doing day to day. And then finally, change. So poor managed organisational change is a major stress trigger. People cope much better when change is communicated clearly and early. A recent study involving the NHS saw the introduction of staff briefings and Q&A sessions during restructuring, and as a result, staff engagement scores improved despite significant changes. So these 6 standards are important to recognise as they give us guys a practical framework to identify and reduce stress risks. So if I can have my next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this as carrying out a stress risk assessment is something that does take time and needs to be carefully reviewed. But in summary, to carry out your stress risk assessment, firstly, you're going to start off by reviewing data. So things like absences, turnover, grievances, feedback. And from this, we can identify hotspots and decide what actions are realistic and who will deliver them to reduce these hotspots from occurring. Now, remember, we need to be cross-referencing with those management standards I just mentioned, as these are proven stressors within the workplace. So if we can identify anything that might negatively influence demands, control, support, relationships, role, or change, we need to be doing something about it. So once we've done this, we should have our list of hazards or stressors, our controls we have in place to mitigate and manage them already, and any further actions we've identified to reduce the risk more. When we're thinking of our further actions, we need to be mindful of how reasonably practicable they are. So this means how much will the risk reduce in consideration to the time, cost, and effort it takes to implement. We are not expecting you guys to put things in place that are going to cause you to go bankrupt. It just needs to be something that will reasonably lower the risk. So once we have these, we'll put timescales in place for implementation, and then we will review, especially after significant change. Some of the most common issues I see in industry is good intentions without follow-throughs. So actually, we have no idea if the measures we want to put in place are even working or are even in place. So that review stage is super important. So just to finish, a risk assessment is that first stepping stone to improving the workplace for the better. It's there to help find your baseline and control your risks, and it's something I recommend we all do, even if we need a little support with it. Thank you. Next slide. I think that's me done.
It is, but what we wanted to do was kind of almost do like a joint case study, so between Charlotte and myself. So I'll give you a few minutes just to read through this. So this is just a case study of a medium-sized charity providing frontline support. We have said that if staff member reports anxiety, exhaustion, and sleep issues, absence increases, performance dips, and no formal stress risk assessment has been completed. So I think we just kind of want to have a little bit of a chat about what should have happened. Alice, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to, can you do that? Okay, are we all back? Right. I hope that's given you an opportunity just to kind of have a little bit of a discussion and think about what's been said from an HR and from a health and safety perspective. I'm just going to run through kind of what we think should have happened. So, um, early supportive conversation, well-being checks, a check-in held promptly, confidently, and next steps agreed. Trial reasonable adjustments, temporary adjustments can be put in place. They need to be documented and set up a date to review them or review them regularly. Absence managed consistently. Supportive sickness and absence process run alongside the adjustments. Then the stress risk assessment completed, identifying and using the health and safety executive management standards, and then controls implemented and reviewed. So practical controls introduced and monitored at a team and role level. So the situation required early support, for the individual alongside the stress assessment for the role of the team. HR processing and health and safety risk management should have happened in parallel, not one or the other. Okay, so key takeaways. So staff wellbeing is both business priority as well as a legal duty. Practical everyday actions make a real difference. Good management and communication with staff is essential. Health and safety law includes mental as well as physical health, and early prevention prevents bigger problems later on down the line. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Catherine.
It would help if I put my mic down, wouldn't it? So thank you very much for that, Lorna and Charlotte. I think that was very interesting, and I think it's fair to say that there was a lot of food for thought there that people can take away. So just a few things to let you know. We do have a number of events and webinars. One of which is our employment law conference, which is on the 17th of March. I think it's quite critical that people think about whether or not they can attend that, because we're going to be covering some quite important things. But then we also have our HR exchange. The next one is on preventing sexual harassment, why investigations matter more than ever, which again is critical because of all the changes that came in both last year and also ones that are going to be coming in within the next sort of year or so. We have our virtual employment law update in spring as well, which is free, as well as our next charity hub, which is on generational diversity, which is quite an interesting topic. So I'm looking forward to that one. Who's got the slides? Lorna. Where's the next one? So in terms of the Employment Rights Act, so unless you've been under a stone for the last few months, I'm sure you're all very aware that there's been a lot of changes that are imminent when it comes to employment law. So it's a core new piece of UK legislation, and it's setting out the fundamental rights and protections for employees. And it governs the relationship between employers and employees. And it's the biggest change that we've probably seen in, I think it's around about the last 20 or 30 years. There's a number of things that you're going to need to think about. So things like your contracts, things like your protection from unfair dismissal is coming in. That's going to be reducing, from 2 years to 6 months. There's going to be changes to statutory payments, family-friendly rights. A big issue that's probably going to impact you within the charity sector is the use of 0 hours contracts and how that's going to be tightened up quite a lot. And so there's a few things that you can be doing now to plan for it. Number one is on our websites, we've got a planner, which is a handy tool for you to be able to download, which is, as it sounds, it's a planner of what is coming in, when it's going to be landing, and some of the things that you need to think about. And what's important to remember is things are still going to change, because there's a lot of things where we've got the headlines but not the details. So if you download the planner now, then we'll be capturing your details, and every time we update the planner, we'll be able to send it out to you. The other thing to think about is whether or not you need an audit within your business, so that we can come in and we can have a look at what you've got in place so far, audit it, see where you're at compared to what we already know about the Employment Rights Act, and then make suggestions about things that you can be putting in place now, so that when these things do start coming in, which are going to be staged over about the next 18 months, you're best prepared for it. And there's a handy little QR code there for you. So if you want to follow that QR code, it'll take you to the page on the website, which allows you to download the planner. And there's also information on there about our audit. And you can also obviously feel free to get in touch with any of us regarding it. So we'll just leave it on for a few seconds. Oh, Lorna, do you want to just leave it on for another few seconds just so that people have the opportunity to scan? Okay, and so does anybody have any questions?
People have been typing questions in the chat as we go.
Yes, which Gail, you've been very efficiently answering.
I've been
I
trying
can see.
to I've been trying to type and answer as we go. But there's lots of really helpful links that people have started to put in, ideas around sort of practical risk assessments as well, and questions. So if anyone's got any new questions, please just put your hand up and we can ask those straight away. Or maybe Charlotte could tell us a little bit more about sort of doing the risk assessments and how people can go about that. I'm assuming, Charlotte, we've got a template that we can share along with the slides afterwards, or some guidance. Certainly, I know we've got guidance documents that we can share with people around wellbeing. Yeah. Is anyone brave enough to put their hand up or ask a question? They want to unmute. A little bit more information about how people might do the risk assessment then, Charlotte, just to sort of get going. I know that you sort of whizzed through that in your presentation, but it would be maybe nice to give people a little bit more information on that, as we've got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I mean, I can send out some guidance. So it's not just as simple as you do these 5 things. Every organization's different. So I don't know how helpful that would be. But I can definitely get together some guidance and some templates and get that sent through to everyone. But I think the most important thing is just taking that step back and having a look at things from an objective perspective, and kind of just seeing, okay, what have we got that might align with the HSE management standards? Has anyone raised anything before? Have we had any previous issues? So you can start and kind of develop a broader picture for your organisation and where you might need to be prioritising and investing time and resource.
Thanks. And yeah, and we will definitely share everything afterwards. Am I allowed to ask a question? Can I ask a question about does menopause come under all of this? Because obviously I've seen a lot more stuff recently about companies sort of thinking about getting together sort of menopause support and policies and things. I'm assuming that comes under sort of the general topic of well-being and helping support people.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, these days it's a lot more in the forefront of people's minds. It's not as taboo as it used to be, and so it is something that's discussed more. We would always recommend having a menopause policy. Menopause can be incredibly debilitating for the ladies that suffer from it, depending on, what your symptoms are. And interestingly, in the last few years, there have been some tribunal judgments where it is now in some circumstances determined to be a disability, and so it should. And so what we always recommend is, yes, you should have a menopause policy in place in order to support the ladies who are going through that change in their life, and you should always forge ahead when dealing with a lady who is suffering from menopause symptoms with the assumption that it may very well be a disability, because then if it isn't a disability, but if the symptoms aren't serious enough to reach that bar, then there's no harm, no foul. But if it is considered to be a disability, then you are protecting yourself as a business from a legal point of view. But I think if nothing else, women of a certain age, as we're all referred to when we're suffering from it, it can just be so challenging, and there are so many symptoms, and everybody deals with them differently, and it can bring on symptoms of depression, anxiety. It can heighten stress levels, and so it should be, it should be addressed, and you should have measures in place. We would always recommend that.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. That was really helpful. Well, we've only got about 3 minutes left. So if anyone else has got any questions, please ask now. We'll make sure that we capture anything which has been in the chat, and send it all out as a pack afterwards, along with all of the slides and links and bits and pieces that people have been. Thank you, Catherine and Charlotte and Lorna. You've been wonderful, and I hope that's been a really interesting session for everyone. And yeah, looking forward to the next HR Hub one about generational divide and differences and how we can all work and appreciate each other.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Lovely.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.